This video, I'm going to talk about Islam in terms of its main foundations and how it was established, and then in the next video I'll talk about some of the different sects and organizations of Islam. So Islam is the second most popular religion behind Christianity. It is mainly practiced in the Middle East, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Indonesia has the largest population of Muslims, so I think that's something interesting to think about. Now, Islam was established from Muhammad's revelation. Muhammad was a prophet, and the Quran, which is the religious sacred text of Islam, was gradually established and gradually revealed to Muhammad. It's not as if he woke up one day and said, like, oh, I understand the Quran, but it was something that happened over time. And there were a series of prophets where God's laws were revealed, but Muhammad was this last prophet. And so Muhammad was also reintroducing the information that had been formerly established by Abraham. So Muhammad then is kind of the final messenger in a series of prophets about what God wants, God's desires, God's will, God's law. And he really emphasized this oneness of God and how God is transcendent and we need to submit our will to God. So the Quran then is a sacred text that teaches about God's will, and it was formerly told or expressed verbally for a long time, and then it was eventually written down. It is like many other religious texts, like the Bible, like the Torah. It is ambiguous in certain parts, but then very repetitive with other parts. And I think it's important to think about kind of the way violence is discussed in many religions, where with Islam, with Christianity, with Judaism, violence is the last resort. Nonviolence is mainly a principle of all of these religions, but it's an example of how someone can say something is ambiguous or was taught in one of the readings or in one of the texts, but it's in fact saying, like, no, you shouldn't be violent. And so I think violence is something that's very clearly not emphasized in Islam and in many religions. So Allah, or God, right, is basically central to Islam in terms of how we need to submit our will to God. And so God is transcendent, like with many other religions. There's a oneness of God where God is revealed through nature and through the cosmos. And at the same time, God is mysterious. Human beings can't really know the essence of God. We basically have to kind of trust what the Quran has talked about and what the prophets talk about. So who are these prophets? Well, prophets are these kind of special human beings who are aware of the desires of God and the divine laws. So the prophets then are the ones who are teaching the rest of the community and the rest of humanity about what God's will is. So Muhammad, for example, then was a significant prophet in basically kind of establishing the teachings of the Quran because the Quran was revealed to him. We also there's an emphasis on this Day of Judgment and Judgment Day. So the Day of Judgment is basically where individuals, once they, like after they die, they have to stand in front of God, and God is going to judge them and assess them in terms of their ethics and in terms of their morality. And each person has a book of their life then that is established and God sees. And so God can kind of assess, okay, what's going to happen to you after you die based off of the cumulative sum of one's actions. Now, what is viewed as ethical or unethical in Islam? Well, there are 5 pillars of Islam. So the first one is faith, or the Shahada, which is basically one's submission to God's will, one's sincerity to God, and they have to kind of utter their faith to God in the presence of a witness. And then this is manifested in the second pillar of Islam, which is basically the mandatory daily prayer, where individuals are expected to pray 5 times a day, and they can pray anywhere. And then the third pillar of Islam is the almsgiving, or the devotion to God, where one is showing and illustrating their duty to God and to their fellow Muslims. And this can be expressed through acts of charity. And then the fourth pillar of Islam is fasting during Ramadan. So it was said that the Quran was revealed to Muhammad during the 9th calendar month of the Islamic calendar. And so this is basically a period of fasting. It has significance for Muslims because it has this connotation of when the Quran was revealed to Muhammad. And so individuals then are expected to fast from dawn to sunset during this period of time. The fifth pillar of Islam is the pilgrimage to Mecca. So, Mecca is basically the special holy land. It's in Saudi Arabia. And so, individuals who are physically and financially able to do it, they need to travel and see this Mecca. So, it's interesting how they do kind of take into place, if you can't afford it or if you physically cannot go, right, that's understood. But if you have the ability to do it, then that is expected. So, these are basically the main ideas and the fundamentals of Islam. We're barely scratching the surface here, right? But just for the sake of a concise video, I just wanted to kind of share some of these ideas and thoughts. And then in the next video, I'll talk about some of the different versions of Islam.